Elias floated awkwardly down the central corridor of the prison ship, his boots magnetized to the floor, though not enough to keep him from stumbling into a wall every few steps. The ship hummed with a strange, almost musical resonance, the kind that made every metallic panel seem alive, and the dim lights above flickered in sync with his own heartbeat, which was already panicking from the realization that he was trapped for an indeterminate amount of time in orbit around a dead moon. He tried to convince himself that the ship wasn't hostile, just extremely unfriendly, but the blinking red warning lights that seemed to follow him wherever he went didn't make that argument very convincing. He glanced down at his ration pack, still sealed with the smell of synthetic protein, and sighed. At least the food couldn't judge him. That's when he saw her. Lysara. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor near the docking bay, her long ears twitching subtly every time one of the automated cleaning drones passed by. At first glance she looked human enough, tall, slender with dark, thoughtful eyes. But the ears, elegant and slightly translucent at the edges, betrayed her alien heritage. They gave her a constant, delicate movement that seemed to punctuate everything she did, almost like punctuation in a sentence of living poetry. She was rearranging some floating tools that had escaped the magnetic field containment and drifted lazily through the air like tiny satellites, and Elias couldn't help but frown at the sheer precision of her motions. "Need some help?" he asked, trying to sound casual, which in his case translated to sounding like a nervous raccoon. Her head tilted slightly, ears flicking with curiosity. "I was managing fine until you appeared," she said, her voice smooth, almost musical, carrying a hint of amusement. "Though I suppose a second pair of hands wouldn't hurt, if you can resist crashing into the walls again." Elias' face heated. "I've been practicing," he said, though the bruise forming on his hip from the previous collision told a different story. She chuckled, a sound that somehow made the cold metal of the corridor feel warmer. "Practicing is one thing," she said, plucking a floating wrench from the air with one hand while the other adjusted her ear antennae with surgical precision. "Executing without disastrous results is another." He offered a sheepish grin and floated closer, trying to match her grace with as little flailing as possible. "So, what brings you to this side of the ship? Or are you the self-appointed caretaker of floating tools?" "I prefer observer of human ineptitude," she replied, tilting her head with a smirk that somehow conveyed both patience and amusement. "Though I admit, the tools were part of my original assignment. Someone must maintain order in chaos." As they worked together to herd the floating implements into a magnetic containment bin, Elias noticed her eyes glinting with mischief. "You make it look easy," he said, attempting to mask his admiration behind a sarcastic tone. "I'm beginning to suspect you've been training for this your whole life." "In one sense, yes," she said, her ears twitching in rhythm with her words. "In another sense, I was trying to survive various intergalactic catastrophes without flinging my dignity into zero gravity." She paused. "Mostly succeeded. Mostly." Elias laughed, a short, clumsy sound that made him feel a little more human in the stark alien environment. "I'll take mostly as an acceptable grade. I think I barely scraped a C- at my own survival attempts." They moved through the ship together, navigating the maze of corridors that twisted and turned like a living circuit board. Automated doors hissed open and shut, some of them responding late to their approach, giving Elias plenty of opportunities to stumble, bump into panels, or spin slightly out of control in low gravity. Lysara never failed to notice, and never failed to make a light-hearted comment. "Try not to knock over the recycling unit this time," she said once, her ears flicking with playful irritation. "I swear, you'll be the first human to be crushed by your own clumsiness on this ship." Their laughter echoed softly through the metallic hallways, a rare sound in a place designed to suppress noise and personality. Even the drones seemed momentarily confused by it, their sensors twitching as if trying to determine whether this new sound was a threat or a new form of entertainment. Eventually, they reached the central hub, a large open area where prisoners were sorted and scanned. Hollow screens flickered with prisoner data, occasionally glitching and displaying absurd errors. A wanted poster of a completely imaginary alien overlord. A high-priority alert about a spilled drink in the far corner of the ship. Elia stared at one, blinking. Seriously, someone's monitoring spilled drinks now. Efficiency is key, Lysara said dryly, though a smile tugged at the corner of her lips. Besides, chaos must be catalogued. It's a universal law. Some call it physics, some call it bureaucracy. I call it a cosmic joke. They found a small corner to sit, the zero-gravity chairs offering an awkward but comfortable way to rest. Elias tried to fold his legs like she had, but ended up slowly spinning instead. Okay, clearly I need more practice, he admitted, laughing at his own lack of coordination. You're hopeless, she said, though the amusement in her tone made it clear she didn't mean it as an insult. But you're a delightful hopelessness, very human. For the first time since stepping aboard, Elias felt something like calm. The ship was still a maze, still a cage, still a cold, humming machine of confinement. But with her here, observing, teasing, laughing, he felt like he had discovered a tiny orbit of warmth in a vast expanse of metal and darkness. A sudden alarm flared across the hub, red lights flashing. Elias tensed, expecting disaster. Lysara, however, simply leaned back, her ears twitching in what seemed almost like amusement. Probably just another holographic goat, she said. Don't ask, don't look, enjoy the chaos from a distance. Sure enough, the hollow projection flickered to life across the hub. A ridiculous dancing space goat with 3 heads, each bleating out a different musical note. Elias blinked, unsure whether to laugh or panic. He chose laughter, which caused Lysara to grin, ears flicking in a rhythm that seemed to mock the universe itself. See, she said, even in confinement there's room for absurdity, for small victories, for unexpected encounters. Elias floated closer, a little more steady this time, and met her gaze. I think I can get used to this, he said, the words feeling heavier than they should, carrying a warmth that contrasted sharply with the cold metal around them. Lysara's ears twitched, the closest she came to a blush. Good. I was beginning to think the ship would be too dull to amuse me. Now, we'll see what other cosmic jokes it has in store for us. As they drifted together in the low gravity, the distant stars of the moon below the ship glinting faintly through reinforced windows, the beginning of something fragile, hilarious, and impossibly human, or almost human, was already taking root. The universe could remain vast, cold, and indifferent, but in this small corner of space, in the laughter shared over floating wrenches and dancing holographic goats, Elias and Lysara had begun to chart the first coordinates of a forbidden orbit. One where love, humor, and survival intertwined, no matter how absurdly the cosmos might protest. Elias had quickly learned that surviving on a prison ship meant adapting to chaos, and with Lysara at his side, that chaos had become strangely entertaining. The corridors seemed endless, each turn leading to another blinking panel, another wandering drone, another human or alien inmate who was either grumbling or trying to make sense of the ship's absurd rules. Elias floated through a maintenance shaft that smelled faintly of ozone and burnt circuitry, trying not to think about how easy it would be to slip into a zero-gravity tumble that could send him into a spinning metallic fan. Lysara was ahead, moving like a ribbon of grace through the shaft, her ears flicking at every sound. Watch your trajectory, she called over her shoulder, her voice almost singing. And try not to announce your presence with a metallic collision this time. I'll try, Elias said, only to immediately bump his shoulder against a hanging conduit. He groaned. Clearly I'm still on the human disaster setting. She glanced back, a half-smile tugging at her lips. You're improving. Last week you would have ricocheted across 3 walls and a security camera. They emerged into a small storage bay, where rows of cargo containers hovered in zero gravity like giant metallic cubes. Elias' eyes widened. This place is a labyrinth. Are we supposed to navigate this without training? Lysara's ears twitched as she floated effortlessly between the containers. Mostly intuition, some luck, and a fair amount of hope. And don't ask me to explain the logic behind the container arrangement. It changes daily depending on the whims of the AI. Elias tried to mimic her movements, arms flailing, feet swinging too far in the absence of gravity. He ended up spinning in a slow circle, only narrowly avoiding collision with a crate marked fragile. Do not touch, probably explodes. You're like a clumsy comet, Lysara observed, amusement clear in her voice. A very loud, very human comet. He laughed, dizziness momentarily forgotten. I'll take it as a compliment, I think. They paused near a floating panel that displayed ship schematics, each line and node representing some part of the prison's twisting architecture. Lysara tapped a few points, and a section of the map illuminated. There's a maintenance corridor here, she said, mostly unmonitored. It will get us closer to the docking bay without triggering the AI's curiosity sensors. Elias leaned closer, peering at the schematics. You really know this ship. Were you trained for this? Lysara shrugged, one ear flicking lazily. Trained in some aspects, gifted in others. Let's just say I've spent time navigating situations that were far worse than a prison ship filled with sarcastic humans and unpredictable drones. Their path took them past the dining area, where prisoners floated awkwardly while trying to eat. Plates drifted freely, occasionally colliding with each other or the ceiling. Elias paused, watching a prisoner chase a floating cup of synthetic protein with the determination of a marathon runner. How does anyone survive here without losing their mind? He asked. You get used to it, Lysara said, smirking as she nudged him lightly to keep moving. Or you start inventing games. I call this one Catch the Floating Nutrition. Highly recommended for morale. Elias tried to grab a floating cup, only to have it slip from his hands and ricochet into a security drone, which emitted a series of panicked beeps before hovering off to report the incident. Not exactly morale building, he muttered. Lysara laughed, the sound echoing through the metal corridors. You're hopeless, but I admit your efforts are entertaining. As they navigated the maintenance corridor, the prison security systems hummed and blinked with near-constant vigilance, though Elias began to notice how Lysara anticipated each sensor's behavior. She moved with a precision that seemed almost preternatural, ducking under laser grids, pausing at pressure-sensitive panels, and avoiding magnetic traps with minimal effort. At one point, she twirled to float past a swinging security arm, her ears tracing an elegant arc as if painting invisible patterns in the air. Elias tried to mimic her movements, failing spectacularly as he collided with the arm and sent a nearby toolbox spinning. I'll never be that graceful, he admitted. You don't have to be, Lysara said, catching the toolbox midair with a subtle telekinetic flick that made it hover perfectly in place. You just have to survive. Grace is optional, but laughter is mandatory. He chuckled, impressed and slightly intimidated. I'll try to remember that, although I'm not sure the ship will cooperate with mandatory laughter. They stopped near an emergency hatch that led to an observation deck overlooking the dark expanse of the moon below. Elias floated near the glass, mesmerized by the distant craters and the faint shimmer of distant stars. It's beautiful, he said softly, forgetting for a moment the gravity of their confinement. Lysara joined him, her ears twitching as she studied the view. The universe has a way of being beautiful even when it's trying to crush you. Sometimes the joke is that beauty exists precisely, so we can remember it when everything else goes wrong. Elias turned to her, caught between awe and something warmer, more personal. You make it sound like surviving this ship could be fun. Fun is relative, she said, her lips curving into a sly smile. But if you can find humor in the chaos even a little, it becomes bearable, and maybe, just maybe, a little enjoyable. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden commotion behind them, a group of prisoners floating toward them, arguing over a map of the ship that had been stolen and rewritten with absurd annotations. One note scrawled in bright holographic ink read, "Beware the space goats, they're plotting." Elias blinked, unsure whether to laugh or worry. Lysara simply raised an eyebrow and flicked her ear. "Ignore the goats. They're harmless, mostly." Elias grinned. "Mostly sounds like a comfortable risk." She nudged him playfully, her long fingers brushing his shoulder. "You'll get used to my definitions. Mostly, occasionally, and probably are all interchangeable here." As they continued down the corridor, weaving through floating crates, malfunctioning drones, and prisoners improvising ridiculous escape games, Elias felt a strange sense of companionship. Every small joke, every shared glance, every narrowly avoided collision brought them closer, not just as allies, but as something more delicate, more daring. By the time they reached the engineering sector, where the hum of the ship's core thrummed through the metal floors, Elias realized he was beginning to understand something profound. Survival on a prison ship wasn't just about avoiding danger. It was about finding pockets of absurdity, moments of laughter, and, unexpectedly, a connection with someone who could make the harsh, metallic corridors feel like home, even if only for a brief orbit of time. Lysara floated beside him, her ears flicking in amusement as a maintenance drone accidentally sprayed a burst of coolant, turning the floor into a slippery zero-gravity slipstream. Elias slid past it with a yelp, spinning wildly, only to be caught by her in a careful, teasing grip. "See," she said, her tone playful, "even disasters can be entertaining if shared." He laughed, finally letting go of the tension that had clung to him since arriving on the ship. The universe could be indifferent, the prison could be cold, and the rules could be absurd. But with her here, he thought, even confinement had its moments of magic, and every misstep became part of the strange, hilarious dance they were beginning to share. The alarm blared suddenly, a high-pitched wail that ricocheted through the metallic corridors, and Elias shot upright in the zero-gravity sleeping pod, knocking over a floating ration pack. Lysara, already upright beside him, ears twitching in synchronized alarm, glided past with the kind of speed that made him wonder if gravity had even noticed her existence. "Relax," she said, voice calm but tinged with amusement. "It's probably just another drill." "Another drill." Elias groaned, catching a floating cube of synthetic protein mid-spin. At this point, drills feel like the ship's favorite pastime, or maybe it has a sadistic sense of humor. She smirked, ears flicking. "Both, actually, and I must say you handle chaos with style." He gave a sarcastic bow, nearly floating into a wall. Style being code for barely surviving. Precisely. The hub was a hive of frantic activity, prisoners scrambling while automated systems swiveled and scanned, lights flickering in chaotic patterns. A rogue faction of bounty hunters had boarded the ship, their sleek craft docking without warning. The prisoners, Lysara noted dryly, were panicking mostly because the AI insisted on announcing every minor infraction in loud, echoing tones. Elias stumbled behind her as they navigated the corridors, dodging laser grids and malfunctioning drones that had clearly been overworked. "This is officially worse than the holographic goats incident," Elias muttered, catching his breath as a small cleaning bot whizzed past, spraying coolant. "You say that like it's improvable," Lysara replied, dodging a security arm that swung down without warning. "Focus on surviving first, comedy second." Despite the chaos, there was an odd rhythm to their movements. Elias had learned over weeks in confinement to anticipate her subtle signals, the twitch of an ear, the lift of a finger, the way she paused just slightly before a dangerous corridor. He moved with her now, a clumsy but determined partner, their teamwork a dance of improvised strategy. They reached a section of the ship where the main AI core hummed, its energy pulsating in patterns that seemed almost musical. Lysara tapped a panel with practiced precision. "If we can override the core temporarily, we can reroute power, disable some of the intruders' systems, and give everyone else a fighting chance." "Reroute power," Elias repeated, swallowing. "Right, no pressure." You? She asked, arching an eyebrow. None at all. It's me doing the work while you provide moral support and comic relief. He gave a mock salute. I accept that role with honor. As she worked, Elias floated near the console, tossing stray tools back into place and making quiet, sarcastic comments at the intruders visible on the security feeds. I hope they appreciate the musical accompaniment of malfunctioning drones. Very avant-garde. Lysara chuckled, her ears twitching in rhythm. You're lucky I find your commentary amusing. Otherwise, you'd be floating in the coolant stream. Finally, with a decisive tap, the AI core hummed differently, lights stabilizing as a surge of redirected energy disabled the bounty hunters' weapons. The ship shuddered but remained intact. Elias grinned, adrenaline making his heart pound in a way that felt almost exhilarating. Did we just save the day? She gave a small, triumphant smile. We've definitely improved our odds. And you didn't even manage to destroy the hull this time. He laughed, spinning lightly in relief. Miracles happen. They moved back through the ship, guiding prisoners to safer areas, dodging debris, and navigating unpredictable corridors with a mix of skill and absurdity. Elias realized how much he had changed since the first day on the ship. He was no longer just a clumsy, nervous human. He had learned to anticipate danger, to trust Lysara, to move with intention, and even to find humor amidst catastrophe. Every misstep had become part of a larger pattern, every joke a lifeline. In a quiet corner near the observation deck, Lysara paused, ears flicking gently. You've come a long way, she said, almost quietly, though Elias could hear the pride in her tone. I expected a human to be hopelessly, well, human. Instead, you've adapted, thrived even. He floated closer, grinning despite the chaos around them. I had an excellent teacher. Though your definition of thrived may include several near-death experiences and at least one holographic goat attack. She laughed, nudging him with an elbow. Minor details. The ship finally stabilized, the bounty hunters retreating after realizing their attack had failed. The prisoners, cautious but relieved, began floating back to their assigned sectors, the automated systems quietly resetting the alarms. Elias leaned back against a reinforced wall, catching his breath, and glanced at Lysara. So, do we get a medal, or at least a holographic certificate of bravery? Certificates are overrated, she said, ear twitching in amusement. But you do get recognition in the only way that matters, my respect, and a promise of more absurd adventures to come. He smirked. I think I can live with that, though I have a feeling absurd might be the understatement of the century. As the ship hummed gently, returning to its orbit around the moon, Elias looked out at the distant stars. He thought of the first day he had arrived, awkward and fearful, unsure how he would survive in a prison built for confinement and indifference. Now he realized, survival wasn't just about avoiding danger. It was about discovering connection, laughter, and unexpected courage in the smallest corners of the universe. Lysara joined him at the viewport, ears twitching softly in the starlight. You've changed, she said, her voice tender now, not teasing. You see beyond the metal, the alarms, the chaos. You see possibility, and maybe even hope. Elias turned to her, heart pounding. I see that now, yes, and I'm grateful for you for this, whatever this is between us. She smiled, the long ears quivering slightly. We've found something rare on a prison ship, a spark of humanity in a sea of rules. Perhaps even something closer to love. He laughed softly, a mix of disbelief and joy. Closer to love, huh? I'll take it. In the quiet that followed, with the stars glimmering and the hum of the ship steady beneath them, Elias and Lysara floated together, no longer just a prisoner and an alien observer. They were partners, allies, and something more. The universe remained vast and indifferent, but in the narrow corridors of a prison ship, amidst absurdity, chaos, and danger, they had discovered something profound. Survival was richer when shared, laughter was essential, and love, even forbidden, even improbable, was possible. Elias realized, finally, that he had grown, Not just stronger, not just cleverer, but braver in ways that mattered. He had learned to face fear with humor, danger with creativity, and the unknown with a partner who could turn even catastrophe into a cosmic joke. The ship, the stars, the prisoners, the bounty hunters, they were all part of a story that had begun with awkward collisions and sarcastic remarks, and now ended with something far more enduring. Lysara extended a hand and he took it, floating alongside her as the prison ship orbited silently. In the metal and chaos, the humor and danger, the universe had given them a gift, a connection that could survive anything. And for the first time, Elias felt truly free. Not free in the sense of escaping, but free in the sense of being alive, fully, daringly, wonderfully alive. The ship's lights dimmed for the night cycle, and as they floated together, Elias realized that life, even on a prison ship orbiting a cold moon, could be extraordinary. They would continue navigating its absurdity, its dangers, and its cosmic humor, but now they would do so together. And that was enough.